Welcome, Jawad, to the show. I'm really excited to have you on. You've got some of these 5 key points, what they didn't tell you, I guess you've got in your book here. And you've also got a really interesting background. So where do you want to start?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this. I guess I'd maybe like to start with the title of the book. So each of my chapters is basically a quote, and it's a piece of feedback that I got throughout the course of my career that in many cases was really difficult for me to hear at the time. And with with experience, with maturity, with more context, I was able to understand and learn that there was some lesson in there for me to learn. And I think my ability to listen to and reflect on feedback and really, incorporate it and digest it and act on it has been the hallmark for success in my career. I find now in my role, like you give feedback to folks and they tend to dismiss it or get defensive or explain it away. And that's not really helpful. Even if you don't agree with the feedback, there's some, nugget in there that you should reflect on. I talk about it in the book, how perception is reality. And I think it's just really important for folks to understand feedback is a gift, and you've got to, take some time to reflect on it, even if you don't agree with it.
So the book is What They Didn't Tell Me. Of course, everything's relative. I'm 64 and you're much younger than me. So you're like a young guy to me, but you just strike me as super sharp. The audience, if they didn't catch the write-up, because we got a lot of subscribers, they just listen to the podcast. Why don't you give them a brief snapshot of your background of, how you got where you are today and where you are today?
Of course. Yeah. So I was born and raised in Boston. My parents came here from Pakistan in the 70s and basically started with nothing. And I, growing up, was the first in a lot of things. I was the eldest of 2 sons, and I had to figure things out on my own, like figuring out high school sports and, what it means to go to prom and applying to colleges and all this stuff. And I think because of that, I had a lot of, because I didn't have someone really showing me the way, I had to figure things out on my own and really got a little bit of an independent streak and got comfortable blazing my own path. And that carried through to when I got to college. My parents really wanted me to be a doctor or an engineer because, from South Asian cultures, like it's one of those two, and that's pretty much it. So when I told them I wanted to be an economics major, they're like, what are you going to do with that? And, I got an internship at Fidelity Investments, and then that turned into a job at GE in their financial management program. And then they breathed a sigh of relief. They're like, all right, well, you've got a paycheck coming in, so you're going to be fine. And when I was at GE, I knew I wanted to learn finance. I wasn't an accounting major, and I'm not a CPA. This is one of the things one of the first things I tell people when they are forming their impression of me as a CFO. I'm not a finance person. I don't have a CPA. I never worked on Wall Street. I came up more through, business and being an operator. And GE really gives you the foundation to do that. When I joined GE in 2001, Jack Welch was still a CEO for for a few months. And a lot of the folks that I learned from were Jack Welch disciples, and they were really operators. They were business operators. So that's how that really formed my early years. So anyways, I was at GE for 13 years in their financial development programs. Got to be CFO. My last job there, I was CFO for their electronic medical records business, part of GE Healthcare, and then left in 2014 to be CFO for a private equity-backed company that was also a SaaS marketing intelligence platform. And basically, for the past decade or so, I've carved out this niche for myself as a SaaS and software CFO. So in 2017, I got a call from a friend of mine I worked with at GE, whose brother served in the Marines with the president of what was then called Taser. And he said, they're looking for a new CFO. Would you be interested? And I said, my first reaction was, no, that sounds like that's a cool company, but I don't know anything really about industrial manufacturing or, defense contracting or any of that. Like, I have a software background. And they said, well, that's why they want to talk to you, because they're trying to transform the company into be more of an enterprise software company. So I met with the leadership team. Rick Smith is the founder of Axon, and he's still the CEO today. And when he told me his mission in life is to make the bullet obsolete, that was something I thought was pretty exciting. And then learn more about the company's pivot away from purely just devices. So they have the Taser that they founded, but also body cameras, and now increasingly software. So we have police record software, dispatch, We have AI technologies that help enable transcription of videos right into police reports to automate police report writing. We have license plate reading technology. We've recently expanded into drones and managing all that video. And that to me was the promise of the company. That's why they actually changed their name. It was the week I joined, we changed to Axon. And that's where I am today. I'm the CFO for Axon, and just sort of in line with how I view myself. And I think how Rick and the rest of the leadership team views me. I don't just own finance at Axon. I also own our legal and IT functions, and our consumer business also reports into me.
Okay, so I got two questions of that immediately. So one is, a lot of people, like you indicated, when they hear CFO, they think financial nerd. Okay, just looking at the books. So talk to me about how, in a well-oiled machine, a CFO actually steps out of that role. I mean, you're overseeing the finances, yes, but then you identified yourself as a software guy. So how does the CFO help really in your case, your company transition to software? Where do you get involved in those other aspects of the organization to help really drive it?
Yeah, so part of it is in helping shape the strategy. We know we want to expand into areas beyond hardware. And so we have discussions around how do we allocate our capital, even putting frameworks in place, like getting better about managing our budget. So prior to when I joined Axon, we were, someone had read a book on blitz scaling, which basically means you just, spend as much as you can and try to spend your way into growth. But we weren't doing it in a structured way. Our margins were tanking. And what I tried to do when I got here was to help the company understand we have a portfolio of products with different stages of maturity. The TASER business is very mature. It's high margin, generating a ton of cash. And we should hold that to a different standard than this like police records software business, which is brand new. It's nascent. We need to go build that team. We have, we should have a different lens there. Should we be more acquisitive? And so basically just laying it out that way and thinking about where do we invest organically? Where do we need to have an inorganic growth strategy? That's part of it. But a bigger part of it, and this is actually why I wrote the book, my superpower, if I have one, is I build really great high performing teams. And that to me, like ultimately companies are nothing more than collections of people, and defining the organization or organizational design, defining roles and responsibilities, and then going out and recruiting the best talent. That to me is the most important thing that you can do. And I spend a lot of my time doing that.
Awesome. I want to jump into these 5 points from the book because it sounds very interesting. But I also want to take a pause, because part of getting those high performing teams is getting them to buy into the vision. And that's a really powerful vision of trying to make bullets obsolete. So how do you guys talk about that? I mean, you sell tasers and you sell body cameras. You're not selling body armor. You're selling some software. I mean, you're not selling, I don't know what would replace a bullet, but how do you elaborate on that? Because that's a fascinating mission, and it sounds really exciting, but then I'm wondering how you peel it back.
Yep. So our mission as a company is to protect life. And that's what we lead with. And then the corollaries to that are to make the bullet obsolete. We also at times talk about protecting truth and really bringing more transparency to the justice system. And that's one thing I think that's lost. There's a lot of dialogue today around policing in America and police reform. And there's often sometimes outrage over something that's captured on a video. And what we're not talking about is the fact that there is a video of it today. And 5-10 years ago, there wasn't. And that's because we're succeeding in what we're doing is we're bringing more transparency to these situations. The vast majority of police officers in the US want to do the right thing, and they want to serve their communities, right? And so they view the body camera as their friend because it's showing exactly them doing the right things. And so what we view it as the body cameras and the software developing there helps officers be more effective at their jobs. It basically helps. The way we view our technology is it helps officers. It makes it easier to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong thing, basically, right? And
yeah, well, it should make you pause and think. I'm reminded of, and forgive me, I don't remember the names or anything like that, but I'm reminded by the woman officer who recently shot a guy. She thought she was grabbing her taser, and so the video actually had her saying, "Oh, expletive. I shot him, it was like clearly an accident. It doesn't make it okay, but I love the fact that these cameras are being used. And so, like you say, there can be truth as to here's what actually happened versus all these sound bites that are trying to get us to believe something that may or may not be true.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's powerful. So let's go into the book. So what they didn't tell me now, also you were very humble in your explanation, but my understanding is that, kind of at 29 years old, you kind of had a light bulb go on and you wanted to move to C-suite. And so you decided to push and then, you ended up where you are today, it sounds very exciting. And you got this book. So where do you want to start? You want to just dive into these 5 points, or you want to go into more of what led you to develop these?
Yeah, I actually would love to start with the latter of that. So I was at a point in my career where I was, I had my first 5 years at GE were all structured leadership development programs. I didn't get my first real job until I was about 5-6 years in. And from that point forward, what I noticed was I was basically doing my job, keeping my head down, working hard, and waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, here's an opportunity we'd like you to take next. And I had actually done that. And I took a job at a section of GE that I had no network. It was in financial services and aircraft leasing. And I went to work for a manager that I'd worked with previously before. I didn't know anyone else in this business at all. 2 months after I get there, he gets his tap on the shoulder to go somewhere else. And I'm now on an island and didn't have, the network and the goodwill that I'd built in, other places. And what I realized was if I keep doing this, if I keep waiting for someone else to dictate where I'm going to go, then I'm going to end up where other people want me to be long-term. And that's not what I wanted. And so I really sat back and said, what is my North Star? Where is it that I want to end up? And what I felt most passionate about was I want to run a business someday, right? That's really what I love to do. I like to be an operator. And the proxy for that was CEO. And I just started working back from that and saying, well, okay, for me to be a CEO, I first should probably get to the top of my function in finance. So I looked at CFOs and I looked up folks on LinkedIn. I read about various CFOs what path they got to there, and then even some CEOs who were previously CFOs, and just basically work backwards from there. And what I really focused on, David, was the experiences I needed to get to where I wanted to go, not the job titles. Previously, I was focused more on job titles. And what that did for me, that really shifted my mindset. Right after I did that, I got calls from recruiters who would say, hey, you're doing this, you're a VP of FP&A, come be a senior vice president in FP&A and get a 25% pay bump at this other company. And maybe I would have taken it in the past. But I said, no, I'm not, because that set of experiences isn't really any different than what I have now. I wanted to only get incrementally valuable experiences that would help me grow and get to where I wanted to go. And when I did that, it changed not only how I look at myself, but how how other people looked at me, because I would tell them the first thing they would ask me is, what do you want to do long-term? And I tell them, I want to be a CEO, and this is why. And that really changed how I viewed my career path, and I got really selective. I talk about in the book how when I was at GE, I was a divisional CFO, and I knew I wanted to be a standalone CFO of an entire company. And I went through an interview, a bunch of interviews, dozens of interviews, and over again, people kept telling me, love the ambition, love your background. You're not ready yet. You're not remotely ready to be a CFO, right? You've got to go be a controller somewhere, go be a number two somewhere, and learn the ropes from someone who's done it. And then, you'll eventually get there. And that wasn't good enough for me. I figured, okay, if that's where I've got to end up anyways, then fine, but let me at least keep cracking at this. And ultimately got an opportunity to be a standalone CFO at a private equity backed company.
So basically it took an opportunity outside of GE to get you where you wanted to go, because they had the layers and the process, procedure, whatever. So when you talk about defining your North Star, you're talking about basically defining your thing was, I want to be a CEO someday.
Yep.
And then based on that, if I'm hearing you correctly, which a lot of people don't do well, so I hope the audience pauses and they really hear what you were saying, is because you had the North Star, you were able to say no to a lot of stuff that was good but wasn't great, because it wasn't going to get you to your North Star. And too many people get bogged down that way.
That's exactly right. And it's so important too to have the right mentors and people who have the experience that you don't. You've got to, you can't forge you can forge your own path to some extent, but you need advisors and you need mentors to bounce things off of.
So is that in your point number 3 here, where you got surrounding yourself with quality people will take you further than you think?
Yeah, it's not only the mentors, but also like your peers. And I learned a lot from my peers. I think probably because my very early roles at GE, when I was a manager, most of my direct reports were older than me. And I learned so much from them. Like it was just an organizational sort of quirk, I guess, that they were reporting into me. It was just a structure. But in many times, like I've had people reporting to me, actually over the course of my career, I've had, now it's a little different because I'm getting a little older and I'm at a different role, but like for a lot of my career, many of my direct reports were more experienced than me. And I never viewed them as like, oh, like I'm your manager and I know better than you. I viewed it as, what can I learn from you? Right. And that's why I think surrounding yourself with quality people is so important, because you can learn from your peers too.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a really important attitude that you need to have, is that, we work together more side by side. I'm putting words in your mouth, versus I'm top down and you're going to do what I say and I'm the boss. And when you come together, then those people feel more comfortable and they're going to feel, okay, this guy's got my back and I can do this. Because I remember I was selling software, and this was back in 2005. And so 2005, 16 years ago, I was 48, and I had a guy in his 30s become my boss. And it didn't really matter to me. I mean, it was a little bit of a insult because of my age and experience that I wasn't even considered, but it was fine. I wasn't really looking to go into management. But he had the same approach. He just came along, said, how can I do this? How can I help? He was very much a people person. And so I can see that works. Now, any other thing you want to mention about this, surrounding yourself with quality people? Because we talked about mentors and you talked about people reporting to you, but when you've got this North Star objective, do you look for certain people that will help you learn key skill sets to reach that North Star?
So that's a great question. The way I think about it is I learned at some point, as you progress throughout your career and you get bigger and bigger roles and more responsibility, what you can do yourself pales in comparison to what your team needs to accomplish. And one of my managers articulated like this. He said, you're very quickly approaching the end of the runway where just like you and your Dell laptop, what you can accomplish, right? It's now going to be about your team. And that's why, to me, what I learned was that there are traits, and this is what I talk about in the book, that there are traits I've learned that you can coach in people. Like if someone needs help prioritizing, they need help communicating, they need help, maybe boiling up a lot of work that they do into a concise format. You can coach people on those things. You cannot coach people on a strong sense of integrity, a sense of accountability, someone who's collaborative, and a sense of positivity. And I know, because I've tried to coach these traits in people, and it's just, you can't do it. It doesn't mean they can't learn them on their own through like life experiences, but I can't coach those skills into people. So I interview for those skills today. I interview everyone that comes into my org and I look for those traits. I don't always get it right. And if we don't, then, you've got to correct it. But I hire for those traits because I know that if someone has those traits collectively, they serve as a heuristic or a shortcut for me for trust. I know if you've got those traits, I can trust you. And if I can trust you, then we're going to be successful, because my style as a manager is not to micromanage. I find that to be really demotivating. I'd rather hire the best people, the smartest people, and let them fly. But I can't do that unless I know I can trust them.
Yeah. And, I do a lot with hiring. I've got a great hiring system. And one of the things that I tell people is you can't hire without a test drive. And one of the test drives can be on the soft skills side, where, you teach them a soft skill and then see whether they then demonstrate that as you continue to talk with them. Same thing, you do hard skills test drives, just to see, can they learn and do stuff, but it makes a big difference. So I want to go to your second point, where you say garner trust by honing your 4 uncoachable traits. Being a coach, uncoachable traits really jumped off the page at me. So talk about these uncoachable traits, and do you feel they're universal to everybody, or?
So yeah, those four traits: accountability, integrity, positivity, and collaboration. Again, this is the one that I think catches some people off guard, as you said. And it's not that people can't learn those; it's that I personally have found that I can't coach. If you come to my organization or to to the company without having a sense of integrity, there's nothing I can do that's going to coach that into you. At least that's what I found, right?
Yeah.
And so there are things, like I said, I can coach you on, and I'm happy to do that. But just those four traits specifically, I found, again, you can learn them on your own through life experiences. I'll give you a quick example. I asked a question once in an interview. I always ask this question: tell me about a time that your integrity was challenged. All right. And most people get it right away, and they give me a good example. The ones that are red flags are when people, sometimes say, what do you mean by that? Like, I don't really need to explain that, but okay, sure, I'll explain it. And then once someone told me, they set up this whole scenario where they were working with, it was a finance person, and they were working with a salesperson who came and asked them to fudge some numbers to like boost their commission. And he was setting this whole thing up, and I'm like, all right, this is great. He's going to tell me how he did the right thing. And he told me how he actually helped this person cheat the system to get more commission, and it like helped garner some goodwill so that he could, use that down the road. And he was very proud of the fact that he, found a way to circumvent the system. And, that's the kind of thing where, look, many times the interview I have with this person, it's one of the few times I actually talk to the person, because once they get hired into the company, I don't really interact with the team all that much. It's growing because we're growing so fast. So now I've got to worry about you taking those shortcuts while you're here, and I just, like I said, that's not something we're going to coach you through. Maybe on your own, through your own life experiences, you'll learn that that's not probably the right thing to do, but.
Yeah, and it can amaze you when you ask the right questions, some of the answers you get, and particularly like something like that, where they were proud of being unethical.
Yep.
Yeah. I was really smart,
Yep.
That's just weird. That's weird. So what about any of the other ones? You want to talk about any of the other four?
Yeah, the one that actually, most of them are common sense. I think people tend to agree, like, yeah, of course, integrity, of course, you've got to have, right? Sense of accountability. The one that I probably had the most dialogue around is positivity. And my view is that there's a spectrum of, positivity to negativity, and it comes to a very sharp point. It's not linear. Okay. It's more of like a hill. And I believe that people roll one way or the other, even if you're at the very point, and people tend to view themselves as realists or maybe like very, very pragmatic or middle of the road. I do believe people roll one way or the other. And where that is really important, I've found, is that when the team faces adversity, which happens inevitably, which way do you roll? And the people that roll down the hill towards negativity, they're the ones that gripe, that complain, that point fingers, that really create a toxic environment and make it tough for people to operate. And they create mistrust ultimately, versus people that roll the other way. They're the ones that say, look, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and find a way forward and look for the, the opportunity to grow. One of my favorite questions I love to ask in interviews is, when you're having a tough stretch of time, not really like a bad day, when you're having a tough stretch of time, talk to me about what you're feeling and how you work yourself through that. And it's such an amazing set of answers I get. I'd say probably probably 40% of 40 to 50% of people give me coping mechanisms. I go for a walk, I play with my dog, or I play with my kids, or, I listen to some music. And then probably another, actually probably closer to 50% of people will reframe the issue, and they'll say, well, I'll take a step back and I, think about how this is not that bad, or I look at the bigger picture, and they reframe the issue. Only like 5 to 10% of people give me what I'm really looking for, which is, that's the time that I shine. I love the challenge, because that's when I grow. And that's when I realize I can learn, something here. And if you don't give me that answer, it doesn't mean I don't hire you, because so few people give the answer. But to me, that's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah, but doesn't it seem like with that 5 to 10% who are going to say, that's when I really shine, then I can solve it, whatever. Part of it may also be, I'm going to step back and reframe it and kind of assess, how do we move it forward, or have we truly hit a dead end? Or maybe if they're emotionally upset, angry, or whatever, that taking a walk or whatever may be part of it. But if that's all they give you, then it's incomplete. So you got a gap. That makes a lot of sense.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So what about this fifth one? Anyone can be a leader, but don't assume you're a leader because you're in a leadership position. I coach people, and I got people that go out and start businesses. That's a lot of the people I coach. Okay. And they feel they're a leader because they have the title, but they're very
Exactly.
dysfunctional in certain areas. And some of them just don't want to change.
I see it all the time. I see it all the time where someone gets promoted or, gets like a big step up in their career and they get a bigger title and they believe that, well, now I'm an SVP or now I'm a whatever. People have to listen to me because of my title. And that's not leadership, right? That's you're a manager and people are listening to you because they have to. Like I could make anybody the CFO of Axon tomorrow and people will listen to you because they have to, but are they listening to you because they want to? That to me is leadership, is when they're listening to you because they're really charged up by, they want to follow you. They want to, they're bought into the mission. They're aligned with your vision and they want to help the team succeed.
Yeah. So this brings up something that we briefly touched on before we started. And that is where you talked about giving people feedback and how some people don't respond well, whatever. So let's talk to me about that, because you're making a point here that someone has a certain perception of themselves that's not true because they're not behaving in the best manner. I'm not saying they're being unethical or, abusing people necessarily, but they're not being as efficient and productive. They're not engaging with people. They're not hitting on your 4 key aspects that you mentioned earlier. How do you give that feedback in a way where it's going to maybe break through some barriers?
Yeah, this is one I deal with quite frequently. You have high performing folks and they get promoted or they get a lot more responsibility like in a short period of time. And then they're maybe not ready to make that leap to be the bigger leader. And they think they're doing the right things, but I will do skip levels and, sort of just have informal chats with folks deeper in the organization just to get a sense for someone's leadership style. And what I hear sometimes is not always positive. In many cases it is, in some cases it's not. And I'll go back to that person, to the leader and or to that person who's, I'm getting that feedback on, and ask them how I think things are going, how they think things are going. And then I ask them, like, have you had a discussion with your team? Have you gotten feedback from your team? Right? It's not just one way. Like, I'm sure you give your team feedback all the time. Have you gotten feedback from your team? And in a lot of cases they say, no, I haven't. And then they start to think like, okay, well, I need to be more open to hearing feedback the other way as well. I asked my team for feedback all the time. I try to pattern that behavior so they see me asking for feedback. So it's not just a one-way street.
Yeah. We teach an expectations exercise that's a written exercise where we ask the leader to basically say, here are the behaviors I want from you in this role, so you'll be super effective. And I want you to make a similar list for me. What do I need to do to be the best boss you've ever had? To try to remove, because I think a lot of the problems come in there when there's assumptions, like you've got that new leader and they're assuming that they're doing well because, they're behaving the way they did in the past, or they're, checking off some lists or achieving some metric.
Right.
But there's actually some huge gaps. And so their people aren't fully bought in. When they're not fully bought in, they're not fully productive.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So talk to me about so you wrote this book. You've obviously got some very clear, concise, valuable advice. Where do you want someone, who's the ideal person to read this book? Where are they today in their career? And where do you think they can be? How do you think the book will help them change how they're spending their time, maybe their perspective on themselves, maybe choosing a North Star or whatever, but what do you think will change with them in reading the book? Everybody's tight on time. And I'm actually very intrigued. I have a stack of books I'm supposed to read, but I'm actually intrigued myself to get your book. So what do you think, what change do you think you can bring about in them that's, that 2x4 across the forehead they haven't received yet?
Yeah. So, my book spans the time from when I was a senior in college to, my time here at Axon. And my publisher was really pushing me like, okay, who's the persona? Like if you could pick one person that this could really like be targeted towards. And I said, if you're going to force me to pick someone, then it's someone who's maybe, in the middle of their career and they've had some success, but they've stagnated and they don't see a path forward. And maybe they're waiting for someone to show them a path or an opportunity, that's going to like get them to the next level. Sort of like where I was when I realized, no, I've got to do this myself. I've got to define my own North Star. Right. And I tell people this all the time. If you get in a car, you don't start driving around aimlessly without knowing where you're going. You wouldn't pull over somewhere and ask, if you were to pull over somewhere and ask for directions, the first thing someone's going to ask you is, where are you going? Right. And so why would you do that with your career? Why would you just start like just aimlessly work and hope that something's going to happen for you? You've got to define your North Star for yourself. So if I'm cornered, that's what I'd say. But really, I think that I would hope that the lessons in the book are universal, and it doesn't matter where you are in your career. If you still have runway ahead of you and you plan on working, and people are living longer and longer and healthier, people that are healthier than ever, why not think about redefining your North Star? That's another thing that I talk about too, is like your North Star. It's not a one and done. You can constantly redefine it. I actually recently did that. For a long time, my North Star, as I said, was to run a business or to be a CEO. And now I'm in this role in Axon where I'm not just running finance, I'm like running a part of the company. And we've got a really tight knit executive team. And Rick, our CEO, he and I have a great relationship. I feel like I've reached my North Star in a lot of ways. I don't need that title. It was never about the title. It was more about being an operator. And I feel like I'm doing that now. And so I recently redefined my North Star to really be more about building and developing high performing teams that are having a huge societal impact. That's what I'm passionate about. And I'd say the same thing to you, if, for example, to you, David, like, well, I'd want to, what is your North Star? If you've got one defined, I'm sure you do, then great. You still have plenty of time to run towards that. And if you have time to probably redefine that too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to go. And what strikes me is that this is an opportunity, not just for an individual to buy your book and kind of assess, have I really defined that North Star? Do I need to define a new one? And then it sounds like the rest of the book is going to give me some tools to better focus on that, learn to say no to things that aren't going to get me there. But also it strikes me that this is an opportunity for a leader who's got a team of people that, like yourself, they really want to develop. Do the book as a team and be very candid with your team about your feelings. As you know, I took Dale Carnegie course 40 years ago. Okay. And every class you had to get up and do a 2-minute talk. Okay. And I think it was 13-week class, ran for a quarter. All right. And one of the key points was real simple. The more personal you make the talk, the more powerful the talk. And if you get with your team, you take a book like this, that's really for them as much as for you. And you're candid about, I made these mistakes here when I was in my, you don't have to share all the gory details that are inappropriate, but there's a lot of details you could share that they wouldn't pick up on just working with you day to day, and share where you want to go, and also encourage them when they're defining where they want to go. Have you had any people contact you that said they're doing this as a group?
I've had a couple do it as a group. Yep. And you're right. That is, in my opinion, the best way to do it in a lot of ways. And I talk about this in the acknowledgements of my book. The book is really a collection of my failures over the course of my career and what I learned from them. And so, I think that's what I've heard is really resonating with folks. Why they find it valuable is that I am pretty candid about where I failed and what I learned from that. And I think it would be helpful as a group to do that, to have that discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. So I encourage the audience to consider that as a group, whether it's with a group at work or a group of peers, a group of buddies from the neighborhood, a group at church, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to get together, and this is good stuff that people need. So
I'd also say, if you do it as a group, and I would love to come talk to you. There was a group of professionals in the Highlands in the UK, right outside of London. They happened to find my book, and there was a group of like 10 to 15 people. I did a podcast with them. They wanted to interview me, and I was happy to do it. I am so passionate about this. I would be happy to join your group if you wanted to have a discussion about it with me.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Well, I'll actually mention that I have a good friend of mine who runs some peer groups, and I'll recommend that he check out the book with that in mind, because I'm sure that would be fun for them.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. I've been so fortunate in my career, and I'm at a point now where I'm not looking for a promotion. I really want to like pay it forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I love what you're doing. So if they want to learn more about you, I know they can get the book on Amazon and other places, anywhere books are sold type of thing. But if they want to learn more about you, where would they go?
My website, jawadahsan.com, or they can
Okay.
go to axon.com, learn a little bit more about our company.
Yeah. Fascinating company. So that's great. Hey, thank you so much for being with me. Really enjoyed the conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.